Hello, welcome back to Fox Beats Fire, and today we've got another programming video, and this time we're doing recursion. So, what is recursion? Well, if I had to describe recursion in a single word, it would be that it is an absolute bitch. All jokes aside, yeah, it can be quite a difficult concept for beginners, or it is considered a quite difficult concept for beginner programmers to understand, because it doesn't quite, the way you think about it doesn't always fit with your normal procedural line-by-line kind of style of programming. It's basically the process of calling a function from within itself, and it's often used as an alternative to for loops and while loops, or iteration if you like. So that's a good way to think about it. Often you can take any iterative process and you can make it recursive. Now that doesn't mean you should do this, because recursion's harder to follow and it's usually less efficient than iteration. So you usually use recursion when you have something or an iterative process that's going to be really complex and very difficult to conceptualize. For example, sometimes I'll be trying to solve a problem iteratively and I might spend 3 hours trying to do it and not be able to finish it, and then I'll come and have a go recursively and I'll do it in 20-30 minutes. So yeah, recursion can be very useful, and it's a very useful skill to learn. You would come across it sometimes or at some point if you were to work in a programming job or to look at some more complex software. So now that I've explained a bit about what recursion is, we're going to go into Visual Studios and we're going to actually have a look at an example. I haven't written this example yet, but I'm going to write it while you're watching and try and explain what I'm doing as I go along, and hopefully by the end of the video it'll make some kind of sense. So before we start, I'm going to be using a list. So make sure you've got the using statement with system.collections or generic, so that we can use lists, and then we'll get started. So what's the function going to do? Well, I'm going to use this function to iterate through a list recursively and return the largest value that it finds in the list to the main function. So if I go ahead and start and make a list now, like list int, and call it numbers, and we'll make it equal to new list of int, and we're going to give it the numbers 1 to 10, or I mean you could give it as many or as few numbers as you want, but I'm going to go 1 to 10, and I'm just going to put them in all kind of random weird order. So if we start off with 6, not like that, sorry, 6, 3, 4, 8, 10, 9, 5, 1, 2, 3, is all of them? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Alright, that should be all of them. Okay, so now that I've defined the list that we're going to go iterate through, I'm going to actually define the recursive call. And when you define a recursive call, it's pretty much the same as defining a normal function, only usually you're going to have loads more variables, but we'll sort of add the variables as we need to, because it's going to be easier to explain that way. So if I'm setting up this function, I'm just going to go public, and I'm going to go static, and I'm going to static, and I'm going to go int, and I'm going to call it find largest. Damn. Just like that, and give it some parentheses. So when we call this function from the main function, it's going to ask it for an int. It's going to ask it for an integer, because the find largest is going to return an integer. And every time you call find largest from within itself, you're going to need to return an integer from that as well. So the first thing you do once you've defined your recursive function is you're going to give it an exit clause. Otherwise, as if it was a while true loop, it's just going to go on forever and ever and ever. So it needs that exit clause to know when it's finished. So if I was to go if, and this is where we start needing to add the variables that we're going to pass through, because what I want it to do is I want it to iterate through the list until it hits the end of the list. So the first thing we're going to need to be passing through is we're going to need to be passing through the list. So the list of ints and numbers. And all we're going to be doing is we're going to be passing this list through the recursive function over and over again. But we're also going to need an index. So I'm going to go int and index, like that. And that's so we know whereabouts in the list we are, and we can call the next index on each iteration through the find largest, or each recursive call through the find largest. The last variable I'm going to need is a variable to hold the largest value that we've found so far. So I'm just going to call it int and largest, and there we go. That should be all the variables we need. So each time it goes through the recursive call, it's going to it's going to check the current index and see if it's bigger than the previous index, and if it is, it's going to set the largest to the current index. Right, so now we're actually going to program our exit clause or our break function or whatever you want to call it, and what we're going to do is we're going to go if index is equal to, and I'm going to do numbers.count -1, because when it hits the end of the list, that'll mean that it calls this if function, and if we hit that function, what we want to do is we want to return largest, because we want to return the largest value that it's found and stored in the largest variable. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to manipulate the variables within the function for the next call. So what do we need to do each time that we iterate through this list? Well, we're going to have to increase the index by 1. So the first thing we're going to go is we're going to do index ++. like so. So obviously that's going to increase every time it runs through find largest. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the largest value, or we're going to check the value of the current index against the largest value and reset if we need to. So we're going to have another if statement. I'm going to go if largest. No, what we'll do is we'll do if numbers, and we'll go index. So that's the current index that it's at is greater than largest. And then we're going to reset largest. So we're going to go largest equals numbers and then index. So as I already explained, that will check the value of the largest against the numbers, or against the value at this current index, and if it's larger, then it'll reset the largest variable. The final thing we're going to have to do for the recursive function is we're going to have to actually call it again within itself, and we have to give it a return. So we have to say that we want it to return something to us. And this is where it gets difficult to track, but trying to think too much about it, just try to think of it as an iteration on the previous one. Because if you think too much about it, your head's going to get all scrambled and it might even explode. So what we're going to do is we're going to return, and then we're going to go find largest. And then this is basically where we just put in the new variables. So we don't need to change the numbers list, so we can just put that in as it is, numbers, like so. We do need to change the index, but we have already done that in the code here. So we can just call index. And we did need to change largest, or at least check largest, and again we've done that in the code, so we can just return the largest, or pass the variable largest. And that pretty much should be done now. So if we were to go up into our main function, and we were to go int largest number, arg, like so, and make it equal to find largest. And then this is where we pass it the variable. So we're going to have to go numbers because we've given it a list. And then for the other two, you're just going to set it at 0 because we want it to start at index 0. And we want the largest value that is found to be 0 because it's not going to have a largest number yet. So just set it to 0. And then we're going to do a console.write line so we can see what's going on. And we're going to do largest number is, or the largest number is equal to, oh, did I spell that right? I did not. And then we'll do our cheeky little 0 in parentheses to put a variable in there, and we'll go largest number. And now when we run that, fingers crossed it's going to return 10. Well, let's see. The largest number is equal to 10. So it's worked, then that's your recursive function complete. There's not really much else I'm going to say about it in here. Recursion is one of those things that you just kind of have to practice. So if you were to do this example and then think of a slightly more complex example and try that, and then think of a slightly more complex example and try that, and keep going with it until you can do some quite clever stuff with it. And when you can, it's going to be really satisfying. A good one you might want to try is, and this will take maybe a few goes at recursion before you're going to be able to do it, but if you have a list of, let's say, 5 numbers, and you want to find every possible order for those numbers, so if you've got 1 to 3, you can have 1, 2, 3, you can have 2, 1, 3, you can have 2, 1, no, 3, yeah, you get the idea. So that would be a good one to do, to find how many possible different orders there are for a list of numbers. That's a good one. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I hope this was useful, and I hope I've taught you what recursion is and how to do it. You can go off into the world of recursion and do your own recursive functions now. That was a lot of recursions right there. So thank you for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.